Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida Fair Tax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, July 21st, 2023. Armed IRS agents raid a gun shop. A June 21, 2023 article in the Epoch Times describes another likely use of the 87,000 new IRS agents that are scheduled to be hired by the IRS. Now, here's what the article described. On June 14, 2023, 20 heavily armed IRS agents from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, carrying semi-automatic rifles and dressed in full tactical gear, greeted Tom Van Hoose, the store owner, when he arrived to open his Great Falls, Montana gun shop at 7:30 a.m. Now, whenever someone purchases a firearm, they must fill out a firearms transaction record, that's ATF Form 4473. This form contains the buyer's name and address and vital information, plus a photo ID. Now, during the 10 hours the agents were there, they seized 12,000 individual firearms ATF Form 4473s, along with other financial records. Gun Owners of America, or GOA, said the organization remains, quote, incredibly concerned about any efforts by agents of the federal government to seize firearm transaction records, given the nearly 1 billion records already in possession of the ATF that are being digitally transcribed into a searchable database in direct contradiction to existing statute. In a June 19th statement, GOA Senior Vice President Aaron Pratt said the raid was an incredibly alarming incident to hear about, especially given the checkered past of the IRS targeting conservatives. This continued weaponization by the Biden administration of federal agencies to go after their political opponents once again underscores the dire need for Congress to act, including defunding the ATF, that's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and demanding answers from the IRS. Van Hoose believes the search for financial information linking him with a crime was just a ruse by the IRS CI agents to seize private information on firearms purchases at his store. Van Hoose said, "They're trying to put mom-and-pop gun shops out of business all across America. They will try to bankrupt me if they can't find a legal or regulatory reason to put me out of business." Now let's look at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. This is a disturbing article for many reasons. First, the agency charged with regulating the sale of firearms by Mr. Van Hoose's gun shop is not the IRS, it's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or the ATF. Now, if there was reason to believe that Mr. Van Hoose was not complying with federal firearms laws, ATF has special agents that could make an armed raid. However, this raid was not conducted by ATF, this was the IRS. Now, this is what the IRS website says about its Criminal Investigation Unit. IRS Criminal Investigation, or CI, serves the American public by investigating potential criminal violations of the Internal Revenue Code and related financial crimes in a manner that fosters confidence in the tax system and compliance with the law, end of quote. Now, it seems logical that the CI will be directing attention to apprehending people who are evading taxes, like drug dealers or criminals involved in other activities, and we can see why the CI agents will need to be armed because the people they're investigating are likely to have and use weapons themselves. In 2021, the IRS proudly announced over 2,500 criminal investigations, the identification of more than $10 billion from tax fraud and financial crimes, and a nearly 90% conviction rate. IRS CI agents are the only federal law enforcement officers with the authority to investigate criminal violations of the U.S. tax code. Their work reinforces the backbone of our voluntary compliance tax system, a system that funds services and benefits for our nation, including defense, infrastructure, and education, said IRS Commissioner Chuck Reddick. Now, there were 261 million federal tax returns filed in 2021. Now, does anyone really believe that out of those 261 million returns, there were only 2,500 criminal evasions of the income tax in 2021? Now, the IRS admitted in 2021 that there was over $1 trillion worth of tax evasion. You may be surprised to learn that in their CI manual, it provides, under the heading of terrorism strategy, federal law enforcement agencies have been mobilized to fight terrorism. In support of this national effort, CI will provide financial investigative assistance in terrorism matters and devote resources in support of terrorist task force initiatives to disrupt and dismantle terrorism financing operations. Terrorism? In the article, Mr. Van Hoose said that a Homeland Security agent was surveilling him and that he was on a terrorist watch list. Now, is he a terrorist because someone who purchased a gun from him said bad things about the government? Now, who defines terrorism and terrorism financing operations? Is the mother questioning a school board ruling committing terrorism that would warrant an IRS raid on her business that finances her family expenses? It's time to eliminate the corrupt IRS and the income payroll tax system. In conclusion, when we enact the fair tax and eliminate the IRS, what will happen to the competent employees of the CI and the IRS? Well, they can be transferred to other agencies like the FBI or DEA, where they can go after real criminals, not ordinary Americans who some bureaucrat suspects may not be acting in the manner D.C. thinks they should be. The fair tax transfers power from the government and the bureaucrats to the people. We, not the bureaucrats in D.C., will decide how much tax we pay. Now, Congress in D.C. know that there's a better alternative to the present system, the fair tax. Now, instead of spending time and money doing endless hours of paperwork that don't create anything of value for yourself, your family, or the nation, why not eliminate the unnecessary waste? Isn't it time that we end this ludicrous tax collection system and the IRS along with it? When the fair tax is enacted, there will be no need to fear being audited by the IRS or raided by armed IRS agents because there will be no more IRS. Now, there's going to be a vote on the fair tax in the House of Representatives. Speaker McCarthy and the other elites didn't want it, but it was forced on them. So we now have the opportunity to force all members of the House to show where they stand. They can vote for the present income payroll tax system, or they can vote for the fair tax. They can support the corrupt income tax in the IRS, or they can vote to eliminate it. It can't be any simpler than that. They can hide the true cost of their government, or they can pass the fair tax and show everyone the true cost of government on every retail receipt. And finally, they can support the largest transfer of power from the government to the people, the fair tax, or they can vote against it. Now, if members think the fair tax needs to be changed, then they can propose that change. Don't let them get away with rejecting the entire bill because it has a tiny flaw in it that can be easily addressed. So please stand with us and demand that your representatives support a much fairer and much simpler and much more efficient way to fund the government, the fair tax. The fair tax doesn't pick winners and losers. Because it taxes spending, not earnings, the fair tax lets everyone save for their retirement tax-free. The fair tax will allow us to take back control. The income payroll tax system is broken. It's no longer working. We can't repair it, but we can replace it with the fair tax. Join us and take back control of our country and our lives, not with bullets, but with the elimination of one of the biggest threats to our liberty and economic prosperity, the income payroll tax. We should all remember Edmund Burke's warning that applies to our efforts to take back control. Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. We should also remember this quote from George Orwell's 1984, which, if we do nothing, may foretell your and your children's future. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. So what can each of us do? We can write letters and make calls to our elected representatives and attend Zoom town hall meetings demanding that if they really want to allow Americans to take back control, the first step is to eliminate the income payroll tax system and enact the fair tax. Take back control. Help us pass the fair tax. Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing, or we can call it investing, $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to fairtax.org and invest in Americans for Fair Taxation. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org.